Hey everyone, Ryan here. This is my review of Biomutant, the Kung Fu Fable post-apocalyptic open world, too many adjectives RPG Biomutant, out now on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. And hey, if you like the review, consider subscribing. A big thanks to THQ for providing a review code. Came a bit late, but can't win them all. Ergo, I may have lost some sleep, some friends, and maybe some hair trying to get this review to you today. To be fair, that last part wasn't Biomutant's fault, but a result of my genetic code, which is the perfect clever segue that I know I just ruined by acknowledging it into Biomutant, the RPG where you recode your DNA, do some martial arts, shoot some faces, and grab some loot, and of course kill some big furry boys. Let's start off with the visuals. In a lot of ways, Biomutant is a gorgeous game. It's got bright and beautiful colors. It's very heavy on the saturation in a way that's kind of appealing to me. I think its use of color is a great juxtaposition to the state of its world. It's been described as a kind of post-apocalypse by developer Experiment 101, and I definitely think that comes across as you trek through the often broken and desolate spaces in the Biomutant's world, while also feeling the sense of a world in recovery. That's a great name for an album, by the way. World in Recovery. Please don't steal that. Fur on the various creatures, including your own, looks pretty good. Maybe not so much up close, but it doesn't blow me away as much as I anticipated it would have, but it's far from bad. Couple of things I want to note about the visuals. I did play on a PS5, so I played at 1080p 60 FPS, or at least I thought I did. I'll get to the frame rate in a bit. Normally, I'm of the mind at least that you can ignore low resolution textures if it's in small places and not in your full field of view. However, it's hard to ignore the abundance of flat, unappealing, and low resolution textures at times. You see pixelated rock facings and cliffs quite often, and also the terrain in a lot of places is kind of rough to look at. It's inconsistent because the other characters and outfits and gear often look pretty solid and don't distract him that way. The different biomes all have their own look and feel that separates them, and look, I can't remember their names, nor could I probably pronounce them, but you have a tropical type area and then a forest-like one and a kind of desert, volcanic type region. Some of them are even accented by small pockets of mist or a different color hue to signify the hazardous conditions that they have. It probably doesn't make much sense that you can step into a specific area and have the oxygen sucked out of it where you can't breathe, only for you to walk a few steps out and be in safety, but regardless, the visual cue is pretty cool. I like most of the locales also. I like it. It's aesthetically pleasing. The destroyed cities and the broken down villages and nuclear test sites and snow-covered facilities, the little tropical areas, the beaches. There's a lot to like in that, and the graffiti you see definitely adds some personality to the world, but it also has the feeling of, I've seen this before, just in a different section of the map. It's not an entirely noticeable thing, but I would just get this feeling at times that I was seeing similar things, or the same areas, but just some assets moved around and repainted or recolored. This might be nothing, but I wanted to mention it anyway so you understand a bit of what I was talking about. Of course, I'm of the mind of, you either notice these little issues I have with the visuals here and there, and you won't care, or you'll be distracted by it, but otherwise you'll be fine with it because it's a otherwise overall very pretty game. It never blows your mind, but it is aesthetically pleasing, mostly. Sound, music, and voice. Biomutant's sound was consistently underwhelming and kind of ineffectual. Your guns always sound one step above someone making the pew pew sound effect. Think Ewan McGregor making the lightsaber sounds when filming Star Wars, but instead of scrapping it, they added some filters on it to make it a bit meatier, but it's still Ewan making the sounds, and you kind of know it's Ewan. Otherwise, guns sound like a mixture between a pea shooter and one of those shirt guns they fire at a concert in sports games. Who wants a custom, limited edition, Biomutant t-shirt? I kind of do, actually. It sounds like a good idea. Swords and melee abilities are slightly punchier, but still don't have that same aggression and weight of an actual sword slash, except for the clonk fist. That thing is awesome, I gotta say. Even when the combat gets crazy or you're flying around on a rocket, the sound always feels kind of muted, almost feeling like it's been compressed multiple times. There was never a time where the sound effects and moment-to-moment gameplay where the audio immersed me, or at least didn't underwhelm me. To put it simply, it lacks a certain oomph or power to it. The music is actually pretty decent. It's rather generic, but its moody and rhythmic tones during combat and more whimsical and more harmonious during normal exploration meant that I actually didn't hate the music here. I actually found it quite pleasant most of the time, and other times I didn't really take note of it. If I had to guess, for me and probably a lot of you, voice is probably the most annoying bit of it all in this game. And I say annoying because the only voice is that of a narrator who I think likes the sound of their own voice just a little too much. The voice actually don't mind, the narrator sounds fine, they point you to objectives, speak for every character, and even give you hints about where to go and points of interest. Problem is that exactly. It very quickly grows kinda tiresome, where you're going to want to turn them off completely. That doesn't stop them from talking entirely, as they're going to speak for different characters, and they'll also notify you of objectives of quests. With that frequency, the narration is fine if you turn it down, but it quickly becomes annoying if every few minutes a narrator interjects to offer you context or lore or just tell you what to do. I'm just gonna do what I want. It's an open world game. Even then, I don't think a narrator in games really appeals to me personally. I always use Crackdown as an example of having a narrator that always just wanted to be telling you what to do and be chastising you for not doing it. Like, hey dude, it's an open world game, I'm gonna do what I want. The only other voices you'll hear is the light and dark aura, or rather the personification of both. They also didn't really do anything and served as more of a random, things you're doing are affecting other things, but we won't tell you what. And I didn't really get the point. They pop up to kind of comment on things you do, and you can be a dick or not about it, and it just didn't really do anything for me. The story, I'm gonna briefly touch on the story, but just to say, it doesn't interest me. There's this backdrop of the Tree of Life needing to be protected to save the world from being destroyed, or destroying the tree cleanses the world of all that is bad. But there's no real stakes to that conflict. You get some morality points in that affect your aura, but they largely don't lean anywhere. Not much happens that makes you feel outright evil unless you capture some critters and kill them, probably like suffocate them or something. I don't know what he does, but they're off screen, doesn't matter. Or you can act like a dick to anyone. It doesn't really make your experience vastly different, except the dark side, you'll just destroy everything. You don't even really have an antagonist of sorts. You can ally with the tribe and fight the others and unite them, or destroy and crush them. But they're no more than just generic NPCs that get mad when you try to assert your dominance. Even then, the writing is kind of vague and very reliant on platitudes and vaguely appealing to your better nature or your worse nature. Yes, the tribe war is going on and you get involved in it, but it doesn't really explain the world to you or build out the world or talk about what exactly these tribes are after. It just exists as a way of having a kind of conflict that you need to get involved in to resolve some way, one way or the other. So the story is really not the focus here. At least it didn't feel like it was to me, but I wanted to mention it here regardless because it's part of the game. Let's get into the gameplay. You will first pick your race: Primal, Rex, Dumdon, Murgle, Hyla, and Fip. They all have slightly different starting stats, but you're not really tied down to any of them, as you'll morph them and kind of change their stats that way depending on how large or small you make their head, for example, which would affect their intellect, for example, there. Then you have 6 classes, one being a pre-order class and then 5 others. So you have Mercenary, Psy-Freak, Deadeye, Sentinel, Commando, and Saboteur. I went with Psy-Freak because the abilities you had access to looked really cool in the promotional content, and normally I don't play magic type characters, but I was going to make an exception here in Biomutant. So after you create your character, you're set off into the world. The classes themselves are not strict, which is good in a way, but also kind of not. You see, regardless of your class, you're going to be using a melee weapon and some kind of ranged weaponry. A lot of the abilities of these weapons are either unlocked automatically, or you use a few points to slightly augment them to give yourself new moves, which I was surprised by. I would go hours without using any psi abilities, and also without even unlocking any abilities because I didn't really feel like it made a difference. And you need to collect the psi points and the other points anyway, so it'll be a while before you even get to unlock more of them, as some of them require multiple points to acquire. Even then, I didn't feel that there was a lot of different abilities depending on the class. You're not restricted to any of the abilities depending on your class. All it really does is determine your starting abilities and your starting stats. That is what it's for, I know, but having these classes effectively communicates, at least in my view, to the player that they're going to be able to create a character that plays the way that they want, but in the confines of that class that they picked. For example, you can pick the Psy-Freak class, effectively the magic class, and you can use a big two-handed weapon without any penalties to your psi abilities. I don't expect there to be major knocks to stats, but there's no incentive to invest in my Psy-Freak class beyond getting psi powers and occasionally upping my intellect upon leveling up. You're just like every other class, except maybe you can Emperor Palpatine some fools more often or quicker than others. And sure, you have perks, but even then I didn't feel like they changed the gameplay too much, where it warranted investing in them too much, or at least a lot of them. You unlock different weapons and can upgrade your ranged, close combat weapons and special tribe weapons with new abilities, but a lot of them unlock for you, so you don't really have a lot of choices to make. You have your mutations, which are mapped to the same spot where your spy abilities are, so you have to choose which ones you want, and you can only pick 4 at a time. It makes combat just, again, kind of plain. You pick from a few abilities at a time and just rinse and repeat, and there's not really fun planning or strategy behind any of it. You can also upgrade all of your resistances with gear or biogenetic points, which is cool, but it also means your character can become kind of like a walking god, which I'm sure some people may like, but it also means builds are out of the question because you can build yourself a god. Point being, they could have just scrapped the idea of picking a class entirely and just left it up to you to pick your stats and then build your character from there. My character's level 30, and I have a lot of the weapon skills, abilities, and resistance upgrades I want, and if I keep playing, I could probably get more, but there's not enough skills in my opinion to warrant focusing on one way of playing or the other. And in that is where the repetition of said combat rolls in. It's rarely without surprise. You'll come across a couple of enemies and maybe a couple of burly boys, and then they'll all try to kill you, and you will effectively jump around and then shoot and attack, and it's the same every time. And that wouldn't be an issue in and of itself, but the quests you get often just have you do the same kind of tasks. Go here and get 3 of these items. Kill 5 of these things. Find 15 of these. I just stopped doing them at some point because I got tired of the relentless traveling around the world and going back and forth just to grab something and then bring it right back. The variety of mounts and vehicles that you use to travel, whether it be a mutant looking horse or a blimp or a jet ski, is really welcome. I will say that some of the mounts feel floaty, but otherwise they're fine. They don't really bother me too much. The jet ski I do feel handles pretty well. Overall though, the mileage for you is going to vary on the mounts and the vehicles because they don't all feel great, or they don't feel tight, I guess is the operative word we're going with here. So ergo, it's all inconsistent. You do get a glider and it's cool, except at times it fights with you and goes the opposite way you want with it. You can climb up walls and build things occasionally, but it's very loose and you'll end up flying back and forth at times and confused about why the game is fighting you. Also, the game needs a lockup button because the lack of it makes combat feel so out of control and chaotic. I suspect not in the way they intended. The soft lock is not sufficient for me. It doesn't work too well, and it makes combat a pain. You'll be swarmed by guys trying to pick off the weakest of them first or the strongest, and you just watch as the game cycles for you in the action between whoever you're closest to, and it makes crowd control effectively broken. Add to that some of the enemies don't even react to damage realistically, which results in a lot of fights where you do tons of damage, but get flung all over the map while most of the enemies ignore the damage that you're doing to them until they die. Crafting I actually found to be one of Biomutant's strongest parts. You don't have to collect a lot of parts or resources, so it's easy to be able to craft whatever you want whenever you want. You may still have to forage for parts, but it is never a grind, or at least it doesn't feel that way. And it's really easy to augment your gear and upgrade the quality, or one of my favorite parts about it is to create new weapons and gear entirely. It gives you a lot of freedom in that regard. Final thing I want to mention for gameplay is the world eaters, the big bosses you'll fight in the game. They look cool and in some ways really make great content for a stream, but I found them all to be kind of similar to all of the other fights, except they were bigger and had more health, and mechanically they weren't completely interesting to me. Most of them have a gimmick that starts you off, and then that's about it. After a point, it's business as usual. They're more interesting than standard fights, I'll give them that, but not memorable in the least. Now let's talk briefly about the performance. The game runs fairly well. Again, I played this on my PS5, so the game runs at 1080p, 60 FPS, upscaled to 4K. For me, strangely, in combat, it doesn't dip too much, but outside of combat in other areas, it weirdly stutters or drops at times, and it's not the end of the world, but it happens enough where I have to mention it. The other thing too is while the frame rate for me was mostly stable, it never felt like I was playing at a full, true 60 FPS. To be fair, I didn't test this, and it could just be my eyes playing tricks on me or me tricking myself, but I just can't shake the feeling that it wasn't always running at a full 60. Take that with a grain of salt, however, as I can't say that with full authority, but it's just a hunch that I had. Otherwise, I had at least 2 crashes, and not while I was doing anything of note. I was just wandering the world minding my own business. I had another few weird bugs, like the game not letting me fast travel because I was in water, despite the fact that I wasn't, and sometimes audio just wouldn't play properly. Otherwise, I didn't experience anything too bad where I can say that the game's broken. I just wanted to let you know of those little issues that I did have with performance. Okay, the final verdict. Before we wrap it up, let's talk final verdict. Do I like it? Yes, I like it. Is it fun? Yeah, I guess I would say so. As critical as I was, I do like it. It's not as robust or as complex as I wanted it to be, but it's not totally unplayable. In fact, there is quite a bit to like here, and it's not a wholly irredeemable mess. It's got its issues, and I have outlined them. It's got its fun parts too, and it's got a feel-good atmosphere, so I think a lot of people will enjoy it despite its issues and my gripes with it personally. But for this review, I would like to rate it on a familiar scale that some YouTubers do, and I think I'm going to in the future, and I think it's a good way of judging it. So here, for the first time, I'm going to rate this on a buy, wait, or pass. I'm going to say wait for a sale, or wait for some updates or add-ons. There's a few reasons for that. It's got its bugs and issues on various platforms that will be ironed out, and of course there's going to be some work done, or have to be some work done, on the 60 FPS mode on PS5. The content itself is repetitive and doesn't offer much variety, so it can get boring quickly. Same with the gameplay overall. And if they do add additional content, it could add some variety that's lacking to the main game, so it would be good to jump in maybe when that happens if you want to. Of course, by then the price could be reduced so you can get in with a lower risk. Anyway, folks, that's all I have for you. Thanks for watching the review. Obviously, if you watched my channel or followed it all, you knew I was excited for this game, and I'm disappointed that it did not meet my expectations. But that's going to happen sometimes. Thanks again for THQ supplying the review code. We'll keep talking about the game as more updates come, and possibly do some more streams if there's interest. Thanks for watching, guys. Please let me know what you thought in the comments. Did I miss anything? Have you played it? What do you think? Oh, and please give it a thumbs up if you liked the video, and thumbs down if you didn't, and subscribe if you're up for it. Thanks again. I'll talk to you all soon, and most of all, I love you. Maybe.